You're listening to the Honey Guess What podcast. I'm Dan,
And I'm Brynn.
and we're here for yet another live edition. We're on Facebook Live, so if you are hearing this and you want to check out the video, go ahead to our Facebook page, Honey Guess What podcast. You can search for us on Facebook, and you will find our page. If you're watching us, thank you, and hopefully you're enjoying this. Any news from you at all?
If you are watching us live, please give a shout out on our comments. We're going to be watching them. We're happy to shout you out in return. Thank you for watching live. So you can be part of the show if you comment while you're watching. I think that's the only other thing I wanted to add. I've got like a tickle in my throat, but I'm drinking tea tonight. In case I got too silly last time, I'm going to try to be chill this time. Drinking my tea.
I'm drinking a lot of tea, both of us.
It's your fault.
It is my fault. You're welcome.
Yeah. I've always been a tea drinker, but like casually. Like I'll drink a cup of tea a week maybe. And just in the last, I think probably since we've been home, Dan has become a tea drinker and he's drinking 1 or 2 cups a day. And so our tea consumption has gone up considerably.
Well, it started out as one of those things where, like, you know, I'm making it for you, and so it's like, well, I might as well have some. And then I start having it, and, you know, then you're like, well, I guess I'll have a cup too. And we enable each other.
We do.
Our tea habits.
We do.
We get crazy.
So now that we've done a bit about tea, we're gonna jump right in.
Yeah, we'll jump right in.
I'm going first this time. So Daniel knows, and those of you who are listening probably know, but I really am interested in pop culture, especially pop culture things that have disappeared and why they've disappeared and that kind of thing.
You've done a couple different things with that.
Yeah, I had an episode about the koosh ball and where'd the koosh balls go, and yeah, I like pop culture kind of things. So I was cruising Wikipedia, as one does, looking for a topic for this week, and Wikipedia used to have a button like I feel lucky or whatever, and it would be like a random. Well, now it's just pick a random article, and I was, random articling through, and I found something that reminded me of something else, and then I anyway,
you went down the wiki hole.
I did go down the wiki hole, but I found something kind of interesting to talk about tonight, though I'm afraid it's going to be a little dry. I tend to try to find more fun things. This is pop culture, but a little bit dry, so hopefully you won't be bored.
Here we go. I'm about to get crazy.
Well,
see, you say you're gonna have something dry, and I just take it as a challenge.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I found it interesting, but I'm not sure whether I should talk about what happened before the pop culture thing happened, or whether I should just tell you what the pop culture thing is, then give you the history.
So how about this? I enjoy trying to guess what it is before you tell me. So if there's a way to do that...
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right. I'm in.
So in the 60s and 70s, across America, there was an increase in public concern over crime.
Okay.
A number of riots broke out across the U.S. Numerous public figures were assassinated. One of the Republican nominees for president just said that crime was one of the biggest issues facing the nation.
Okay.
Though he didn't win the presidency, Lyndon Johnson did. The issue of crime did not stop.
Sure.
In July of 1965, President Johnson formed the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice to probe fully and deeply into the problems of crime in our nation.
I have an inkling. You don't have to tell me if I'm right. You don't have to tell me if I'm right. I'm going to say police scanners.
No.
Continue.
Okay.
All right, never mind.
So after 2 years and $2.5 million, the commission delivered its report, The Challenge of Crime in a Free Society, in February of 1967, which influenced the Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. The act gave $300 million to local police forces for more personnel and equipment.
Okay, that seems fine.
With the election of Richard Nixon in 1968, the attempts to control rising crime rates shifted from a social approach, the war on poverty, to a tough-on-crime approach, the war on crime.
Oh, this goes well. Okay.
Despite Nixon's attempts, crimes continue to rise, and up through the 70s. The Carter administration took the focus away from crime and onto nuclear arms and control and human rights.
Sorry, just the transitions. Like, we failed with this, we failed with this. Let's take on the big boom. Sorry.
Yeah. And Carter's presidency, crime continued to be a concern because of serial killers were on the rise in the 70s.
Okay. So
all of that is background.
Okay, all that background. Are we doing horror movies?
No.
Okay. You had an inkling in your voice there. So I'm close. I'm feeling it. All right.
No, I mostly meant that you were fairly far off.
Okay, all right.
You're going to get it when I go into this next part, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So in 1977, the Ad Council was approached by the Department of Justice to create a public campaign to engage the public in reducing crime.
Okay. Yep.
The FBI director recommended a campaign playing on the fears to convince citizens to take personal safety steps, but the Ad Council rejected their proposal, believing it would be largely ignored by an already frightened public. The Ad Council was still interested in crime prevention campaign, but they were looking to go in a different direction. Lee Perellis, a member of the Ad Council's Public Policy Committee, heard an idea that he liked. He met with the FBI director, Clarence Kelly, the head of the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, to work on a new ad campaign.
Okay. Stranger danger.
No.
So I'm getting there.
You are.
I'm getting
kind of glad I didn't give it to you right up front. I feel like you're working your way there. And honestly, the same way they were. They were trying to figure out what to do next.
Okay.
So the Ad Council gave the creative responsibilities to Dancer Fitzgerald Sample, who had previously worked on the Keep America Beautiful campaign.
Okay.
In February of '79, the Ad Council's board of directors held a meeting where they looked at the information that Sample had compiled. He had conducted focus groups in a number of cities to determine public perception on crime. The focus groups found that the public believed police should be the ones to prevent crime, but they were unwilling to pay more taxes to support more officers.
Okay. I know who they're going to enlist.
Yeah?
It's not Smokey the Bear. It's McGruff the crime dog.
It is McGruff the crime dog.
Did it. Nailed it.
So yes, so they wanted to emphasize the individual actions that could reduce crime and offer accessible opportunities for people to participate. The task was given to Jack Keel, Executive Vice President and a creative director, who was thinking about Smokey the Bear and came up with the idea of an animal mascot.
Yep.
After coming up with the slogan, "Take a bite out of crime,"
yes,
he settled upon the idea of a dog. So there were lots of different versions, and I'm just going to read you a couple of them before they settled on, McGruff as he looks now.
Okay.
There were several teams that came up with several different proposals. Some included a bulldog version of J. Edgar Hoover. Right?
Who was... He looked like a bulldog, though, didn't he?
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, only in the Leo movie we saw. It was Leonardo DiCaprio in that, right?
J. Edgar, yeah.
Okay. He kind of looked like a bulldog.
Sure. I mean, he had that kind of persona, so
okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Jeez. All right.
Someone brought up an idea of a golden retriever, a mongrel who becomes a wonder dog, an aggressive...
they thought of Air Bud before Air Bud.
An aggressive-looking deputy dog. One of the first drawn versions was a Snoopy lookalike wearing a Keystone Cop hat.
Keystone Cop. I'm not familiar with
I think it's like a Midwestern, like a Ranger cop hat.
Oh,
as opposed to a city cop hat.
Okay.
I could be totally wrong. I have been wrong before, but that was my understanding. So the one that they finally settled on was a talking dog in a trench coat, who was described as tired, had seen the world, and epitomized all the detectives we knew, from Raymond Chandler to Dashiell Hammett to even Columbo.
Oh, he really had a really gruff voice. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that was decided all on in 78 into 79.
If you can't do the crime, don't do it. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. That's a soundbite from like 30 years ago.
Right?
Yeah, it's in my
So
head.
it was like they were really excited about this task force. They were really excited about the idea. They thought it would get people on board. And of course, in 1979, the Law Enforcement Assistant Administration, the LEAA, which was created by President Johnson, was being criticized for the wastefulness of the money they were spending on this kind of thing, prompting President Carter to shut down the program.
Okay.
However, the person who was in charge, his name was Dagelman, who was in charge of tearing apart, like taking down the whole thing and being done with the this whole program.
He was cleaning house.
Yeah.
Okay.
He saw that there was a value in the public outreach side of it.
Okay.
So even though they took apart most of this legal aid, like whatever they were calling it, group, he convinced the powers that be that they should keep the public outreach portion of it.
Okay.
There was still a lot of criticism. That's the word. Criticism. I swear, I'm just drinking tea tonight.
So, what administration was this? Carter.
It was Johnson into Carter.
Johnson into Carter. Okay.
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 So,
sorry.
No, it's fine. So there was still a lot of criticism about it, like wasting money on a talking dog. Like you pulled apart this whole thing that was supposed to get the public safety up, and now all the money is just going into this talking dog cartoon. People were not like excited about it.
Okay. So it was all bark and no bite.
Sure. It wasn't until the very end of 1979 in November, they came up with the slogan, "Take a bite out of crime," publicized it, and did a nationwide contest to name the dog that got people excited about it. And he was named McGruff the Crime Dog, almost named Sherlock Holmes.
What?
That was the second runner-up name. Sherlock Holmes. Holmes, Homes. Reminding people to lock their doors. Sherlock Holmes.
Okay. Yeah. McGruff is way better.
McGruff the Crime Dog is way
better.
Way better. But that was the second.
It's
funny.
Was the second
run.
So when you started talking about this, I almost jumped in with, and I only didn't because I had never heard of the policy, but I was talking about like locking your doors.
Yeah, and that's so there's like a lot of statistics in here, which is why I thought this was gonna be so dry. But there was like this whole thing about how that it was like a 7-point program, and of the 7 points that he really touches on in the commercials that he did in the 80s into the early 90s, actually the commercials kind of went up and down, but he was around for a good decade. He touched on 7 main points, including locking your doors, having outdoor lights on, having your indoor lights on timers if you're going to be out of town, having a neighbor watch your house if you're going to be out of town, getting a dog. I don't remember what the 7th one was, but there were like 7 steps to keeping your house safer that were in all of these commercials. And of them, 3 spiked, and it was getting a dog, turning on outdoor lights, telling neighbors they were gone. But not the main one, which is like from locking your doors.
Yeah.
Because, and like I said, it's like pretty data driven, and it said like 70% of people who had seen the commercials claimed to have already been locking their doors. So it was like whatever, but all those things like it did have an effect. And at the time of like most of this research was done, he was still, I have my papers out of order. He was still recognizable by like over 50% of adults recognized him even now, and he hasn't had commercials, like TV commercials on the air in over 20 years. So
yeah, that's a good campaign.
Yeah. That's not completely true. He was resurrected into a TV commercial for Geico in 2018.
Okay.
But kind of as a joke,
Right. Yeah.
like Geico commercials are. He was walking into a police thing and he was telling them about like this this evidence that he'd found, and they were kind of ignoring him and talking to him like a dog. And then it turned out to be a Geico commercial. So
Yeah. Sneaky guy.
it's totally Geico, right? Like that's the kind of thing they do. But yeah, so I mean, I got all of this information off of Wikipedia. You can go to the Wikipedia page and read like the statistics that I didn't read. But what's interesting that I thought is that he's continuing to be well recognized because they've changed his tact. So originally it was about keeping your home safe, preventing crime in your own neighborhood. And then he went on to have some spots about drugs. You know, the war on drugs was kind of a thing when we were younger, which is kind of more how I actually remember him. There were some anti-drug commercials that used McGruff. And then even still now, he's being used in print material and stuff to prevent elder abuse and cyberbullying.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought was interesting. So he's still in use. What else did I learn about him? The other main thing that made him so popular was that they had, I started going out of order and then I set my papers. They had put together a campaign in which they made a McGruff costume.
Yep.
And for a long time it was played by one guy, and he did the costume, but then individual police stations, police forces were able to get costumes to use for parades and school outreach and those kind of things. And that really drove home the McGruff message.
Yeah.
And personally, I think I remember a McGruff dog.
Yep, me too.
I'm not sure if it was at school or if it was at some sort of school-sponsored event or something that there was a costumed McGruff dog there.
I was thinking like State Fair or something.
Oh, definitely
Yeah,
a state fair where the troopers are. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's what was in my head, but it's possible that it was a school function. But that's what I thought. So likely, probably some of you have seen it out there too. If you
and he was on a ton of print material through the 80s and early 90s to mid 90s. And a lot of times those kind of things are still available. You know, like the police departments buy the print material in bulk, and then they use it at school programs, and then they end up in the back of a warehouse, and then they pull them back out, and they give them in giveaways. So his picture and stuff is still out there. Like I said, he's still recognized by more than half of adults that were asked.
Well, cool.
So.
Jess has something for us. She says, for a long time there was a robot McGruff at the fair. Oh, yeah, animatron. Yeah.
And I actually think, and he's like a little bit shorter, right? And it's like on wheels. I'm pretty sure that it still exists.
So
I spent a lot of time at the fair.
Yeah.
Like many years in a row, and I remember that.
So actually that brings up a good point. Oh, she says it was like remote controlled.
Yeah, it was like on wheels, and it was a little bit shorter than a person. Well, I mean, as a child, it was definitely shorter than an adult.
Well, thanks, Jess. So I think what I would like to do is, if we have any McGruff sightings from here forward, if you see or
tag
hear,
the Honey Guess What podcast every time you see McGruff.
Every time we'll get a McGruff count every time. Hey, the state fair does the mullet count. We can do a McGruff count. We can do this.
That's what he looks like. This is literally a printout from the Wikipedia page.
Here's the hound you're looking for.
Oh gosh, we're a mess.
Yeah. So
that's what happens when you Wikipedia an hour before we're supposed to go live.
It was good. I liked it. It was a trip down memory lane. So thank you.
Well, and I love that kind of stuff because it's like you forget about it, and then it's like, oh yeah, what happened to that? That's how I felt about the koosh balls that time. Like,
well, cool.
Secret, Easter, I got the kids' koosh balls. Yeah, I'm super pumped.
They'll probably hate them and will feel terrible.
I don't care. I'll play with them.
Yeah. It's one of those gifts that you just adopt if you don't like it. So, we're not selfish. We give it to them first, and then when they reject it, it becomes ours. So, that's fair.
That's totally fair.
So here's where we take a break for ad, and then I'll come back and I'll do my part. I'm going to start now, and I'll do my part. Mine is, I'll call it rather topical.
Okay.
It's relevant to something that you and I both have been experiencing, as you've mentioned at the start of this. We've been drinking more tea.
Oh, I was like, what have we been doing? We've been sitting at home.
But this actually came from a conversation you and I had. So I also never used to like honey. And so we had a conversation about like, okay, well, I was being a snob, basically, because the honey that we got, we loved it, and we ran out. And so I needed to go buy off the shelf rack honey. We got it from a local.
All honey comes from bees.
Right, okay, again, I was being a snob. But rather than take that as like well, I just know my stuff and I'm not gonna like listen to it, I decided to educate myself more, okay?
Sure.
I decided to do some research.
So you're going to be even more of a snob, because that's
the
what
worst.
happens.
The worst. I'm going to be
It's
insufferable.
like people who enjoy wine and then take a wine course and then become like wine snobs.
Yeah.
You're going to be a honey snob now.
Well, that happened with me too. Don't
yes,
you remember?
I remember.
It was great.
That was a not so subtle dig, honey.
That's great. So, I didn't like wine before the wine course. Yeah. I liked it better afterwards. Okay, so the first article that I'm going to be citing is from Scientific American. Okay, is the website.
That sounds reputable.
It does. It's the two most reputable things: science and America. So
don't get political, Dan.
I wasn't. I was just being silly.
Okay.
All right. So it was written by a guy named Alex Wild. His credentials is he was teaching, at the time anyway, he was teaching a course on beekeeping at a university. So, so basically what he had written about is that the difference between organic and non-organic honey.
Okay, yeah.
So,
we jokingly talked about this without doing any
research.
Like, how do you tell the bees to only step on the organic flowers?
Right, exactly. Because the bees don't know any difference. They're not going to, and they have such a wide range, right? And so I was like, okay, well, what I had said was, well, maybe there's, places that have, almost indoor or, colonies that are just, secluded somehow, in a greenhouse type thing. It's like, maybe they do that. I don't know.
So then it's like you have to pick between organic honey and free-range honey.
So basically, what I gathered from this article is that we were onto it's basically just marketing, because unless you are a beekeeper who is in a very remote, secluded area, who owns tens of thousands of acres of land for your bees to get their pollen from, your bees are going onto land that you can't verify is pesticide free.
Yeah.
And so that wouldn't normally be a problem, except that it's marketed that way. But two, the reason why it's not usually much of a problem is because the amount of pesticide and impurities that ends up in honey is very small.
It's processed by the bee. It's,
right.
Yeah.
It's processed by the bee. The amount that ends up in it is very small. So, and then it depends on the type of honey that you get, which I'll get into later.
Well, and I don't want to get into it with people who prefer organic over but that's true for a lot of secondary processes. Organic vegetables obviously are grown differently than traditional vegetables, whatever. But in a secondary product like honey or dairy or whatever, things that end up getting processed or being processed by an animal somewhere between what they consume and what we consume, the research shows that there's very little difference.
Correct. Where there is a difference, and this is something I didn't know at all, where there is a difference is, and this is also why it's almost impossible to verify that a colony was only using organic means, is that the bees' wax that ends up actually collects and concentrates any pesticides that are picked up. And so a lot of times what will happen is when beekeepers are helping other beekeepers start new colonies or starting another colony even within their own business, they will take the comb from one to another. Not the comb, take some of the wax, the start of the hive, from one colony to another to start it up. Over time, that concentrates, and there's some that were tested on farms that actually showed that it was like a concentration of like 98% of pesticide was in the wax. And so like that's something
so crazy that the byproduct. Well, that proves it though. That proves
correct.
that the honey isn't affected because
it goes to the wax, right?
That's crazy though.
Right. So that's something though to consider.
Its own filtration system.
It is something to consider when looking at buying beeswax products and stuff like that. Like think about that. That does also go through more processing on the human end. So that's something to be aware of.
But still, that's super interesting.
So to go take it a step further, I was like, okay, so organic versus non-organic, like kind of a wash at that point is what I determined
in terms of honey.
But I was like, okay, well, what about the marketing for the different types of honey that you can buy?
Wildflower honey, clover honey.
Right. I was like, because you have all these different labels on it, and obviously when you are able to grade and label something, you can demand a different price. And so, that's how we do it with milk, that's how we do it with eggs, that's how we do it with any number of products. So you're in the agriculture market.
Yeah, I mean, even like another natural sweetener, maple syrup.
Yep.
You pay for the darkness,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
it helps the agriculture to diversify the product so that it can get different prices based on people's tastes and wants.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing. But I'm like, but what's the difference? What are we paying for and why are we buying it? And so I was like, okay, well, I want to find that out. So what I found out about with honey is that there's a few different ways that you can buy it. And the one that we had originally, maybe not originally, the most recent one that we bought was raw honey. Okay. Now, raw honey is not pasteurized. So there is...
Which means that it's not pre-boiled.
Correct. So if there are any... I'm going to use a...
naturally occurring bacteria.
Correct. One that has been talked about is botulism in trace amounts. If that does occur, that's not going to be removed by any processing or anything like that. Now, for the most part, that doesn't hurt people. People consume raw honey, very rarely an issue. Okay, they do recommend not giving raw honey to babies, infants, just because their immune system isn't quite what ours is.
Right.
But for the most part, not going to hurt people. A benefit of raw honey, though, is that over any sort of processing, if you have local raw honey, it will have some pollen left over in it, and some, again, lack of a better term, impurities from the comb, from the hive. And what is great about that, it also has antibacterial and antibiotic properties sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And
so if it's local, you can actually develop a bit of immunity to local allergens, floral pollens, if you consume, some amount of that.
We talked about that too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Dan has pretty bad seasonal allergies
mm-hmm.
that are, we've learned now that are mostly have to do with dust, but still consuming local raw honey
mm-hmm.
can help build up his immunities on those
mm-hmm. So
in general.
That isn't why I've been buying it, eating it. It's not why.
No, we just suddenly got addicted to tea, which is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. So there's that. Anytime it goes through any processing, so anyway, raw honey can be either filtered or unfiltered. So you can get it filtered to have some of those things removed, but it will not be boiled, will not be purified, so to speak. So the next one was, well, what if you do process it? What can you get? So the next part, my phone just bleeped out on me. There's two, that is regular honey and pure honey. Now, if you see these two things on a bottle, they're not the same. Regular honey is pasteurized and it may contain added sugar. Okay, so if it says regular honey or it doesn't say pure honey on it, take a look. It may have added sugar in it. It might not, but it may. If you're just going for flavor, for baking or something like that, and you don't really care about that, have at it, no problem. If you're wanting to make sure that you're only getting that pure honey, no added sugar, you're going to want pure honey. It contains no added ingredients. So if it says pure honey, it is just pasteurized.
And not to get on my own soapbox, but one of the additives that's sometimes in not 100% pure honey is occasionally food coloring to make it a browner, caramely or color, which is an issue in our house.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons that I demand pure honey.
Yep. Check your label. Just as with anything, check the label. It will tell you what's in it. So the next is, there's a couple manuka honey I had not heard of. Manuka honey is made by bees that feed on the manuka bush, and it's unclear. It may have additional health benefits. It's a specific plant that...
Where is manuka?
I didn't see that in this article, but it's a specific type of bush. The next one is forest honey, made by bees that take honeydew from trees instead of nectar from flowers. So that honey ends up being darker in color, because it ends up being more like a blend between syrup and honey.
I want to get all these different honeys and do a taste test.
Oh, like a wine tasting or something, right?
Okay, you turned it around on me.
Oh,
okay.
Who's the snob? Who's the snob now?
We had to stop listening to the Honey Guess What podcast because they got so snobby about their honey.
I mean, guys, it's in our name. I waited till the second season, okay? You're in. You're hooked now. You can leave if you want.
We're changing the punctuation. It's honey, exclamation point. Guess what?
Yeah. So this is actually, the whole thing is going to be about bees from now on. This is a bee podcast from here forward. So, surprise.
Surprise.
All right.
Sorry.
So next, the next one is acacia honey. Bees feed mostly from the flowers of the black locust tree. It's often lighter in color than other types of honey. So the thing with raw honey, I want to go back to, there aren't any definitive studies that confirm that it's better for you.
Put a pin in that, Jess.
We're going to put a pin in that one. Actually, I'll just say, I don't know.
So Jess asked who came up with the bear-shaped honey bottle, though, she's asking the tough question.
It's a real tough question. It's a good one. Because it's not just one brand. There's a lot of them. So, I'll tell you what, though, whoever was the real game changer, this person who decided that whatever bottling you're using for honey, ketchup, whatever, that you put the cap on the bottom, and especially for honey, that's great. Genius idea. That's my little tangent. So, that's the real hero of the story.
Yeah,
anyway,
well, the honey bear you just got has the cap on the bottom, but a lot of the honey bears don't.
A lot of them don't, and that's a mistake. That is a mistake. You lose so much, and you get so much frustration just trying to get a little bit out. So,
we've gone off.
So,
usually it's me who takes things all the way off the rails. I'm glad.
So, again, raw honey, there are no definitive studies that show that it has added health benefits. There's suggestion that you do find more antioxidants in it. You do find antibiotic qualities, but whether it actually helps you as a person when it is digested is unclear. So there isn't anything that is definitive about
Good
that.
job covering your butt, Dan.
Yes.
We are not doctors. We are not health professionals.
That's exactly what that was. Also, pasteurization may damage or destroy the antioxidants and or beneficial elements. Once again, when you cook things, all bets are off. So the process, it does make the honey smoother, though, and more aesthetically pleasing. If it reduces health benefits, we're not sure.
Well, sometimes you want a honey that's like pourable, spreadable,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't crystallize, and that's why like they do these processes
Mm-hmm.
to give a more marketable honey.
Yeah. So basically what I took from it is if you're looking for health benefits from honey, you have a possibility of getting it from raw honey. You don't really have much of a possibility of getting it from a process. But the take home that I got was if you want to make sure there's no additives, make sure it says pure honey or raw honey. Those two things, you will not have any additives whatsoever. Organic versus non-organic doesn't seem to be much of a difference. So
Cool.
there we go.
And I actually think that might make you less of a snob, because he was really like, I don't want to buy honey from just anywhere. I like this honey the best. And I do think that like honey from different places obviously has a slightly different taste.
Sure, absolutely.
That's 100% true.
Mm-hmm.
And the honey we were using was from a semi-local beekeeper, a friend of Dan's parents, and it was delicious honey. Delicious. But I think the honey that you got from the store recently is not terrible either.
No.
So
yeah,
it hasn't slowed down your tea drinking.
I recently got one in a bear bottle, and I haven't gotten to try that one yet. But we'll see. I'll keep you posted. Because I'm sure you're all waiting anxiously to hear my honey reviews. Start a blog.
Oh my gosh, you have too much time on your hands.
To help me. So I think that's all we have for tonight. If you have any other questions or anything.
Yep, we'll stay on for a minute to do questions. This will be the end of our broadcast. We're going to turn off the recording in just a moment. I do want to mention that if you are not following us on Facebook or YouTube, please do. We put new things on there. If you're listening to this later, please go and find Facebook. You can see the video, see our beautiful faces.
Or not. You can just, have it sitting on in the background like a podcast.
Like it's supposed to be.
Like it's supposed to be.